Hello and welcome to Note to File, a clinical research podcast, a collection of interviews, candid commentary, and general tomfoolery for the clinical research industry. Check us out at notetofilepodcast.com. Without further ado, on to the show. All right. Hey, I think I did it. So, new intro. Let me know what you think. Let's do it together in Canva in about 6 minutes. So obviously spent a lot of time on it. Welcome to another Sticky Notes. The date is March 12th, 2025. And today I've got Paul Ivsin joining me. What's up, Paul?
Oh, lots going on. Good to be here, Brett. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we're about an hour earlier than normal. This week we've got a lot of people coming in already for the conference here, which I'm looking forward to. I think you're going to be there, yeah?
I am. I got three of us from Continuum will be there. So not selling anything, just a listening tour for us. We don't, but I think it'll be a good one. So we'll have a couple of people from our site solutions group, and just want to hear more about the current state of affairs and how things are working for actual sites.
Nice. Yep. Good place to do it. Cool. Mm-hmm. Let's jump right in. Lisa, there's a lot going on. We're certainly not going to get to all of it. Trying to keep these things to a half an hour, but at least try to hit on some of the more interesting things maybe that have happened over the last week or two. Actually, one thing I wanted to sort of hit you up about is I was able to watch, I watched about half of your sort of the one and done PI myth webinar that you did with, I think, Dan Schell and the life science leader people. Kind of curious, just your takeaways and, if you felt like, I think it was sort of, people were hoping for like some debate and some true, like, spontaneity, but do you feel it went that way? Do you feel you got your point across, or kind of what was your takeaway at the end of the day?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I saw Dan just posted the recording of it. So if people are interested, that's out
go check
there,
it out.
and I'll, we'll reshare it. But yeah, I think Dan was looking for a debate. I think I was ready to have a debate. But it's a tough thing to ask people to kind of step out of their comfort zone. I think, everyone had some slides and we got to stick to the slides a fair bit. And, it's all good stuff. I don't know if it was quite as lively a discussion as we were hoping for. And, it's, we spent a lot of time just kind of rehashing some of the same data points over and over again. So I would love to talk about it more. I think it's still an open question. What PI turnover really means in the industry. I think there's some great lines a conversation to have about what, if anything, we should be doing about it. And so hopefully that's just one of many conversations going forward. So I thought some good points were made. I thought there was some interesting stuff, but you definitely have to, it's a webinar, and it kind of feels like a webinar at times.
I can get to your point. It can be hard. People don't want to necessarily come off their talking points. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, I'm certainly guilty of the same thing at times, but I know something you've come to me, you've sort of advocated for is more like true debate, like within the industry, and like people who actually disagree. And I think, it can be challenging to find people who will do so in a respectful and meaningful manner. But I'm with you. I think it'd be interesting to see more of that, because we don't all agree. Yeah, we all generally agree about the same end result, but there's so many ways to get there that I think those things are worth debating. So check it out. I didn't realize the full thing had been posted. So Dan Schell, if you're out there, I know you watch sometimes, feel free to throw it into the comments. So, we can get that out to people who may want to watch. I'll talk very briefly about the sort of Science 38 debacle that happened over the last couple of days, which very, just sort of from a high level, I'm not going to beat a dead horse or anything, but I was at Scope actually, and walking down through the exhibition hall, and I kept seeing booths, and I was like, what is that? What does that mean? And like, it was crazy to me that I could sort of walk through and read these booths, be in the industry, and have no fucking idea what any of these companies did, or half of them anyway. And I thought it'd be really funny to potentially, I wanted to buy booth space and put just like crazy, incomprehensible jargon and just see if anybody like noticed it or if it even stood out as differently from the crowd. And so my initial thought was like, okay, what if like what's a play on a company that's out there? Science 38 seemed like low hanging fruit, especially given their somewhat recent history. Um, Started the website. Thought it'd also be funny to sort of write newsletters that are poking fun at the industry and whole, as a whole, not necessarily at Science 37 specifically. Um, Understandably, their attorneys or their board was not a big fan of that, so they basically asked me to, shut the domain down. But I did have a talk with the CEO yesterday. Super nice. I think he sort of once he realized and was kind of in on the joke and not knowing if like this was coming from some disgruntled employee who was going to try to take him down or do some other nefarious things, like was pretty cool about it and actually discussed just withdrawing the claim. Um, Anyways, either way, I'm going to find a medium to sort of do this stuff, whether it be through something like Science 38 or not. So there'll be more to come, but it's essentially a non-issue at this point. So I just wanted to kind of put a little bit of a resolution on that for people because I was getting a ton of messages and I don't think a lot of it was meant to be shitty on either side, but could have easily been construed that way.
That's a good backstory. And I, it's funny. I'll admit, um, it took us a few years. I mean, I work in patient recruitment, patient enrollment. I've done it for 20 years. Like that is a core offering of our company. And we had a booth that for years did not say those words on it. And that would be the number one question people had when coming up to the booth. So what do you do? Because it was always like you have to show your value, not your service. And it's like, well, you got to level set with people here. And so we have it prominently. And I will say we have it prominently on the booth. And the guy who designed the booth pointed out to me that the number one question we got at the booth this year is, so what do you guys do? So we solved the writing problem. Apparently we didn't solve the reading problem.
Sure.
We'll get there. We'll get there eventually.
Step by step.
But
Got a couple of comments.
I've been doing it for a long time, and there's a lot of booths that if they're new, I do not know what they're up to.
Yeah, that seems, I don't know, seems like a problem if I can't walk by and tell, at least generally speaking, what solution, like what problem you're solving, and again, it's not any one company. I mean, I feel like it's a much broader problem than it should be, but it is what it is. A couple of quick comments before we jump into a couple more current event type issues here. One comment from, I will try to say your first name and butcher it, but Wajishek Futoma. It's difficult to have a debate in our industry. Too many overly emotional people in decision-making positions that hold grudges. Too many stories of pushback being met with loss of opportunities. And it's unfortunate. I think this is a problem in the industry as a whole, though, is people are afraid to lose opportunities. I mean, I'm in a somewhat unique position, I think, where I'm a site. I feel like most of the time, unless I'm just being a complete jerk, like if I can enroll patients in trials, I'm going to probably keep getting business. So I can at least have a little bit of leeway. Also, I mean, also why work for yourself if you don't have the ability to at least express, what you believe to be true. So I hope we see more of it. But I do find, just by the amount of messages I get in the background, like people are afraid to really come out and say things that are even fairly milquetoast in my mind. Like that's not a that's not a strong opinion, but people are still afraid to express it. So I guess that could make debate challenging. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I've been trying to push for is, I get it. Like it's tough. You got to be able to think on your feet if someone is pushing on you, and people don't want that, especially in their kind of well thought out communications. But like, is there an opportunity to plan it ahead of time and to volunteer and say, yeah, we have different opinions. We're going to sit down and we're gonna engage on this. I find it, the sessions in conferences, I think, are the worst offenders, where you have people who clearly have different opinions and they kind of refuse to even acknowledge the fact that they may be thinking slightly differently. They're
Right.
completely nodding in agreement, even if they're saying things that don't really fit together at all. So hoping there's some opportunities to open that up, right? It doesn't certainly don't need to turn into Reddit. We don't need everyone arguing with everybody all the time, but could you acknowledge that there are different approaches. I think that would be good in a lot of areas.
It's a good start. It's a good start.
Yeah.
And great comment from Dan. What's up, Dan Shell? Agree with everything you said. What are the main point you'd make that you didn't? Maybe that's something tack on for another session. But he did post the link, so again, I'd recommend you guys go check it out. A lot of good information there, on both sides. I think it's enlightening and maybe at the very least make you think about it a little bit differently. Because I think it certainly changed. Because again, I've fallen prey to the. Well, I don't want to say it as though it's a bad thing, but like I sort of see these stats that are put out, and I'm like, oh, okay, that must be true, and that must be a problem. Well, is it true, and is it a problem? I think those are at least good places to start with some inquiry. All right, I'm gonna hit up a couple of recent events here. We're about halfway through already, so let me see what I can get up here. I think one of the big things that we saw, and of course I'm screwing up my screen share, but let's see. A big acquisition, private equity firm buying out Walgreens. I think this was something that's been rumored for a while now, and sort of finally coming to fruition. I'll be the first person to say, like, I'm no expert on, the condition of CVS or of Walgreens rather. It seems like their stock has been not particularly well, and you've seen some issues with things like Village MD. I'm not that well schooled on it. My only initial question becomes what happens to their research operations, if anything. Generally in every place I've worked, even in academic institutions where research is supposed to be gets a little bit more credence, I guess. Obviously, research is almost always the last thing anybody gives a shit about. It's just not a big deal. We've already seen companies sort of divest in dealing with research. Obviously CBS is the sort of classic example who dipped their toe in and we're like, nah, we're not going to do it like that. I don't know. Do you think that that's a likely outcome with Walgreens as well? I sure find it hard not to think so.
Yeah, I think publicly and we've heard kind of privately as well, consistent message so far that nothing's changed and they're still all in on research. But I don't think anything's going to change until there's a change of ownership, and change of ownership is going to imply a hard look at everything. I don't know how everyone else feels from my perspective, this big influx of pharmacy, and it's those two, and also Walmart's got an offering, and Express Scripts has an offering, and
right.
What's been shocking is how little it's actually changed any part of the game. All these big companies with all this data and potential touch points with patients, it hasn't felt like a big seismic shift. So I know Walgreens got a fairly sizable contract recently with BARDA. You assume they have some incentive to keep that going. Are they going to stay in the rest of the space? I think it's probably literally everything's going to be on the table as they kind of figure out where to cut costs. And to your point, it's going to be a tempting target.
Again, with my very limited knowledge, I would think so. And again, just seeing how it's played out already across other companies, and again, all the caveats here. I know a lot of people who work in these companies, they're great. None of these are meant to be criticisms against them, but more so criticisms against the decisions of large companies who come out strong saying how much they support these things and they're the best right thing to do. And then as soon as it becomes a financial question, it's like, all right, never mind. We cared, but not, as much as our bottom line. And I can't imagine that getting better with private equity,
Yeah. Yeah, we'll wait and see. Obviously research is a tiny fraction of what Walgreens does in the space. And if you look at, how PE is dealt with retail chains across the board, this is a Sycamore one. Sycamore probably is most well known. I think they bought Staples.
Yeah, they
I
did.
always
Yeah.
forget. Yeah, I think it's Staples. And that was a comparable size deal, and you can kind of track how they're doing to get maybe a vibe as to what might happen with Walgreens. It's a tough field in general. Like all of these big chain retail outlets have struggled. So um, I do feel like the impact on research is going to not even be a second thought. It's going to be the third or fourth thought as they kind of revamp that business.
Yeah, that would make sense. And speaking of private equity buyouts, here's one that you actually clued me on. Is Bluebird Bio. And honestly, you're
Yeah.
probably a lot more knowledgeable about this than me. So you got a recap. You got a too long didn't read for us.
I mean, it is amazing and honest. Personally, it's depressing. Like this is cutting edge science. This is gene therapy. One of the pioneers of gene therapy with three approved drugs. Sickle cell beta thalassemia, rare disease, and it's just running out of money. And had to sell for I forget what the number is, something like $30 million dollars. I mean,
I
imagine you
believe
have
it's 30
three
million.
FDA approved drugs and you're worth 30 million. And I know that can go up to something like 90 or 100 if they can get the revenue up to a certain level, right? This is definitely a bet by a PE firm that they can run the company better than a group of scientists who are running it now. And maybe they're right. The idea of discovering and putting a drug through trials is very, very different from getting doctors to prescribe it, getting it used in the market. And you could argue why are those two things always so tightly together, right? Why does every biotech want to grow up and be a big pharma? Maybe they should just stick on being discovery engines, and would it be better if they had spun it out, right? Because it feels like Bluebird's got great stuff and just doesn't keeps losing money. And how do you that's not something we think of when we think about the pharmaceutical industry, is companies that are losing money on approved products. So
But yeah, the deal was just over 29 million, which is less than half of their 68 million market cap. Which just, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, that seems pretty crazy to me.
Yeah, by all accounts, they were about to run out of money in the foreseeable future, because they had a really aggressive R&D program and weren't making that much. Yeah, I really hope that this means that PE will act for good here and actually has a plan. The only way this is going to work for them is if they get these drugs to more patients, right? There's no other things that that they can peel off to make this work. So it's entirely like, do these gene therapies get used, and do they continue to demonstrate pretty life-changing results? And if they do, then the PE firm will make a lot of money, and good on them for doing it. But it is tough to see a company that I think everyone has loved for years and doing this really cutting edge stuff, to see that they kind of hit this point in the road.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna stop my screen share really fast because I just now realized it wasn't following me to the next tab as I was moving across it. So I'll do the window here. Bear with me, guys. Technical difficulties. There we go. That's better. I've gone to all the trouble of highlighting the info here. It wasn't showing up. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So again, I guess this is another one of the reserve judgment for now, and kind of see where things go. Either way, nonetheless, a pretty major development, I would say. And when was this? This was just, this is few weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago. So still a lot of uncertainty there. I always like to touch on a Reddit post just because I have a soft spot for Reddit and the anonymity that people sort of lean into. And of course, as someone who works at a site, I thought this was particularly kind of a fun post. But the initial post is about a CRA feeling as though they're sort of treated as an enemy by site staff Um, you know, they're oftentimes, you know, treated in a dismissive way and with, arrogant tones. Um, I think the real fun is where you get down into the comments and you start to read like the first one is great. It's super nice. It's about, understanding, wanting to meet that energy and sort of, be shitty right back to site staff, but not doing it and, treating site staff, well, not necessarily rushing to respond in a negative way. It's great. I think we've all been there too. I've treated CRAs poorly only to like regret it. And then I've had, all kinds of reactions from there. But then I think where it gets really funny is you get a little further down. Let me see if I can find it now. Don't tell me it's gone. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've worked with CRAs who are just like this. It says, when I have sites like this who undeservedly treat me like an enemy and cause me a headache, God forgive me. I make their life fucking miserable. Make them rethink all the choices they made in life, which again sort of cracks me up. Because I think again we've probably all been there from the site level. So I just know I find it hilarious that you get that sort of stretch of responses from CRAs who have to deal with that. And look, man, that's a hard job. You got to deal with all kinds of stuff. I hear the stories about them being stuck in closets and working in bathrooms even and things like that. So God bless CRAs, but also have some grace for each other, because sites are oftentimes being jerked around by an investigator, a site manager, query management, the CRA themselves, someone else who works for the sponsor. So maybe it's ironic, but I'm trying to preach a little bit of kindness here,
Yeah. It's humanizing the other side. I mean, in this kind of model is always, gonna be a challenge. I do say I think the past few years, honestly, more than that. I mean, would go back to when Christine Pierre founded SCRS. Like, there's been at least an attempt at acknowledging the existence of sites and finding forums for them to talk about what is bothering them. I don't know that does that exist for CRAs in really the same way, besides the occasional like anonymous vent posts. I mean, they're in a tougher spot. They can't call out people probably nearly as much. They're not going to get. They probably will suffer consequences if they're complaining too much.
That's a really good point. Actually,
it.
I've never really considered that, and I know that's a good point. I don't know that they have that same forum for. I mean, yeah, Reddit often, and I'm sure there are maybe some back channel groups out there, who go talk about these things, but you don't really see like I don't know. I've never seen like a CRA focused get-togethers or conferences or whatever the case may be, where they're able to sort of more talk through this stuff in person. So that's a fair point, actually.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it. Save our CRAs.
You gonna invite are there any CRAs on panels at SOS?
Yeah. There's some CRAs out there for sure. And again, I think if you read Reddit especially, I feel like Reddit is very CRA heavy. It's like very job hunt specific or very like CRA focused. So you see a lot of like CRA content on there, but yeah, we definitely have CRAs there coming out, being on panels, and I recommend it because it's it's like everything else. Like, they can be your biggest asset or your worst nightmare. And again, go go check out that thread and you'll see some of the absolute mad responses in there, which just kind of shows the spectrum again, which I found just interesting. All right, we got 2 minutes. I want to hit on this because I found interesting. But you don't always necessarily see a lot of like direct repercussions for some of the bad shit that's happening at sites. I'm always quick to rip on everyone, but we're not always from the sites, and frankly there's a lot of shady sites out there too. So this was 2 owners of a clinical research facility in Florida they pled guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud in connection with the work on 2 clinical trials testing drugs designed to treat asthma. There were some interesting things in here. They were unlawfully enriching themselves by making fraudulent representations to the asthma drug trial sponsor regarding subject eligibility, falsifying and fabricating material documents and data, including case histories, spirometry readings, echoes. I think there's something in here that states that they made false statements that the PI was conducting physical exams when they were not at any of the visits. It's crazy. And I know I've worked for PIs who were like, hey, just fill out this physical exam for me and I'll sign it later. So I bet a lot of sites have put into positions where this kind of stuff could happen. And I think it's rare to see at least very objective evidence that you can get in a whole lot of trouble. And it makes me wonder how much, if this is what we see, how much do we not know about,
Right. Yeah, these guys seem kind of next level, right? I saw someone immediately commented, of course it's Florida.
Yeah, right.
Just the fraud Hall of Fame. But this looks like they're just wholesale making stuff up. And that, even your worst CRA is going to notice it seems to be no actual data attached to this record. So
yeah, I think most people are not.
But it seems like they really just went,
they went
they
hard.
probably needed to hold 10% of their effort back to figure out how to cover up the fraud rather than just doing the fraud. They seemed very excited about doing the fraud and not about
yeah, but I think there seems to be this cosmic rule in a way, right? The people who are intent on doing this sort of thing are generally not smart enough to not get caught doing it. To your point, a halfway reasonable CRA is going to realize oh, this shit's just straight made up. That's whatever. You didn't fudge a blood pressure reading. I'm curious how they falsified spirometry readings. Are they just blowing in it's crazy. It's crazy. And I don't know where there's more of this to read. Maybe you could do some FOIA type stuff to get, or maybe there's a court docket somewhere where you could read the details. I'd be really curious to know more about this.
Yeah, there should be the plea agreement should be online somewhere. That would be the full. As part of the plea agreement, you gotta kind of admit and stipulate to all the facts of the case. So that should be available out there somewhere in Southern District of Florida.
All right. If anybody out there finds it, shoot it along. Hit a couple of comments really quick. We're already kind of over time, but no, this comment here. No, there's nothing for CRAs. Reddit exists. Many people are in there are extremely jaded. They are. And I think, like a lot of those forums, you kind of tend to get the people who have the most complaints, I guess. If everything is awesome, you're not in Reddit looking for something to complain about. But I've noticed that too. It seems to be very sort of extreme edge cases in there, but also that's why I find a lot of sort of joy in reading them, and almost like reading fiction in a way, even though it's ostensibly not. But I don't disagree. There's really not much for CRAs. So somebody listening out there, maybe that's an opportunity.
That'd be fun. I would love to see that. That's definitely a hidden corner, and it's one I think everyone kind of gloms onto is CROs can't hire people fast enough. Maybe there's some training issues. A lot of bouncing around from one to another. I think there's a lot of good content, good insider info that most people don't see. That would be great to.
Well, I think CRAs specifically see a lot of the industry just because they see hundreds of sites, they see hundreds of protocols. They see a lot more than people at. If I look at one site, you see the way things are done in one place, and a few protocols every year, or however big you are, obviously. But there's probably a ton of unearthed value in CRAs who aren't sharing more. So that would be cool to see, a forum that's more dedicated to CRA stories. Cool. I mean, that's pretty much it for today, man. I don't know. Anything you want to wrap up with?
No, always fun. Good to catch up, and looking forward to being in Oklahoma City for the first time ever.
I mean, don't get too excited. It is Oklahoma City, but there's some nice undiscovered gems, or not undiscovered, but sort of low key cool places in Oklahoma City. So
that's what you guys have put out a to do guide, like a little intro guide to
yeah,
what to do while we're there.
I thought, yeah, dude, I'll tell you this, putting on a conference is not a job I want to have. There's just way too many threads to pull on and try to make work. So I'm sure there's a lot we could have done better, and maybe we'll get better at it as we go, or we'll just stop doing it altogether. Who knows? But nonetheless, I'm excited to see you guys at SOS. I'll still be back next week. I'll talk a little bit about sort of SOS recap and probably any other cool stuff that comes up along the way. I've also got interviews with the CEO of Science 37 coming up next week.
Very nice.
As well as someone from the Alliance of Multi-Site Research Corporations in a couple of weeks as well. So we have some cool stuff coming up. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Paul, for coming on. Love to have you on a semi-regular basis as you're able to make it. And thanks again, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. Great job.
All right, we're out, guys.